Yeah, this is a dumb thing to move it. Are you sure? Yeah, to that. That's enough. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. If you're new to my live streams, it doesn't get much more interesting than this. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to paint these guys, finish a few with you, and listen to probably food theory or game theory or some kind of theory online. And that's it. Yep.
Last time on Game Theory.
Yeah, so you're welcome to drop by every once in a while, say hi, or, just hang around and keep me on in the background as noise.
What are they doing the sacrifices for? Where does Sarah fit into all this? And who is Alice? Hello, Internet! Welcome to
Come on,
Game
hurry
Theory,
up.
the show that wants to walk a mile in your skin. That was weird. Maybe I just need to... Whoa, what is happening with all these glitches? Quickly, if you hit that subscribe button, it should stop them. Did it work? Thanks for your help. Clearly the glitches from the new Giggleland AI have been leaking into the videos of anyone who dares to uncover the truth. Last time, we began exploring what was happening in the
What happened here? Here we
were getting
go.
updates from a girl named Sarah about a mysterious communist cult called the KMW, run by a man named Sarah's mother, Debbie, used to be part of this commune.
Oh yeah, I remember that episode.
Things Sarah
Alright.
leaving us with no leads or information to work with. The website had also been updated, now containing new clues that sadly didn't really seem to lead us anywhere. We've got phrases like thumb brew and lifeless, but no cipher or key to put them in. The main thing we got was a quote saying, "It wears my skin," which we suspected may have something to do with the evil mascots that have been hinted at. But there was one more avenue for us.
It's always the mascots.
YouTube ad about a new gaming website featuring the orange cat Elliot from Elliot and Ella, the TV show made by the KMW. Sure, it wasn't the Giggleland game that we were hoping for, but it was still a game we could play. And the multiple endings of Elliot's adventure revealed to us the KMW's real intention with the children they took care of in the commune. We met Mr. T,
Hello.
the in-game counterpart of the cult leader Terry, who asked Elliot to help him gather seeds so that he can purify them from the evil sorcerer. The sorcerer is the big bad of this video game, though we've never actually met them. And the more endings we discovered, the more we realized that purify meant sacrifice. Based on the collectibles, background art, and enemy types, it appears the KMW were following the Aztec rituals of child sacrifice and wearing their skin to appease their gods.
I never heard that part about Aztec culture, about wearing their skins.
The game's not even out yet. Then there was a secret message
Okay,
in the
almost
game
there.
for Debbie herself, written by her partner, the mysterious
Hi,
Simon.
guys.
It warned her that
Isn't
if
this
she didn't
thrilling
leave
live
the
stream?
commune, Terry would
Yeah.
do something awful to
Trying to get
Sarah.
the
So
second
neither
coat on
of
most
them
of these
would
guys done
survive.
tonight. Maybe
This
some more
is what
detail
led
work,
Debbie
but
to run away from the cult
yeah.
all those years ago, and why she is now so protective of Sarah, not wanting her to go outside or learn more about the commune. Unfortunately, it was at this point that we hit a dead end. By completing the game and taking 0 damage, we discovered that there was a dev build of the game somewhere. It gave 0 hints to where it might be, but I knew it held the answers to the secrets that we were looking for. Why are they sacrificing kids? Why is Sarah so
Hey, Patsy.
important? And who is Elliot?
How are you doing tonight?
Join me, friends, because I am determined to find this dev build and uncover the truth behind this creepy Aztec cult.
And you ready for work tomorrow?
Without further ado, let's solve the second act of Giggleland's ARG. Let's think about this logically. Elliot's adventure is on the Kids Gaming Zone website, so surely this mysterious...
I just finished 4 days straight, so I am looking forward to not getting up at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. And maybe even sleeping until 8.
Because there is a lot of clicking and a lot of pages that are just pretty normal. That is, until you get to the very bottom and click on the web host link. Unsurprisingly, this takes you to a website where you can buy website domains. But by scrolling down to the bottom, you can see a list of recently registered domains. And this is where things go from regular to irregular. Game Tips is a website that gives you tips and cheat codes for games, including Elliot's Adventure, mentioning a god mode in the dev build. Other websites had hidden URLs URLs covered with text directly taken from Sarah's Tumblr posts. Oak Barrel Brew had a secret message when scrolling to the bottom of the page about how abandoned children's fingers would twitch as if they were trying to send a message. It's super weird stuff, but they are all things connecting to what we covered last time. Another one of the website's laughing little ones looks like a website about the biggest party ever, and so naturally I'm gonna put in all my details because I want to be part of this super cool, totally real party, please. But after doing that, screen went black, a weird sound played, and the text appeared, Sarah location, as well as a bunch of random
There we go.
letters.
Gotta figure out what I'm
Once
gonna
again,
color
we
these
have
guys.
ourselves a code. What type of code is it? I'm not sure. This isn't any cipher I can see, but as I mentioned last time, thankfully there is a dedicated team of theorists on the official Discord that were able to help
I'm gonna
us
do
out.
the
Links to
orange
their
next.
doc will be in the description. This
No.
time, Discord
Where'd
user
it go?
Chap figured out that breaking the
Where
string
did-
of letters into 2 letters at a time are the
I got that
first
little
2
dot,
letters
but I don't have
of
any more of the
website
original
we
mix,
have
so.
discovered on the domain page. GL is global street foods, RE is retro bite hub. It all matches up, but we still don't know exactly what any of this means. We do know that we're on the right track. It's just, where do we go from here? Which seems to
Where
be
do
a
we
running
go
theme in
from
this
here?
ARG. But again, chat came to my rescue. They'd found something new on the old missing persons report from Act 1. Seriously, chat, you are crushing this. What they found was a new audio file named Conversation, but like always, it's password protected. Though I think we already have part of the answer for this one. I mentioned that in our part 1 video, we uncovered some secret words that meant nothing at the time, one of which was fun brew that we discovered thanks to a random string of letters on the KMW
There we
website
go.
and a note in the
I
guest
do need to
book that
redo the
encouraged
nose
us to
again,
use
but
this
these
as a
eyelids are
means to connect.
fabulous.
Now, this is where things are going to get a little
Okay.
complicated, but bear with me. We have two
I'll
words.
do
One
4 now.
Stay
Dry if needed. Drier than normal.
One of the websites we explored
This one's doing
last
next.
time was called fun.html, and then we discovered another word that meant very little at the time, lifeless. Now, one of these new websites is called Oak Barrel Brew, implying that the second half of the code is hidden in this website. On that website, we saw a secret message about abandoned children and how their fingers were a message to something. We're trying to open up a conversation on a missing children's report. So, is that the secret word? Finger? The thing communicating? Funbrew equals lifeless finger. Yes, that unlocked the WAV file. Let's have a listen, shall we? Ah, yes, the wonderfully nostalgic sound of a modem. I remember hearing that sound every time I tried to connect to the internet as a kid. Cue the Matt Damon gif. Now this is an ARG. Obviously, those aren't just sounds. And if you use an FSK decoder like Mini Modem, you can actually mimic a modem receiver, which will translate these sounds into text. It ends up being a chatbot between 2 people talking about a strange program appearing on TV while their kids were watching. But when they looked at a TV guide, they weren't able to find it. Sounds to me like we've got another instance of Elliot and Ella on our hands. One of the parents says it reminds them of the Channel 10 hacking that was on the news a while ago, which is interesting. I did always wonder how this terrifying Elliot and Ella show would ever make its way onto the air. Trust me, I worked in kids TV. No network is greenlighting this. But now, the pieces are beginning to fall into place. No one needed to approve this show because the show was being hacked or forced onto the airwaves. In the first ARG, we found a video called The Second Hijack, where we heard in the background an episode of Elliot and Ella. I thought that this was in reference to the hijacking of a kid. As we'd already found a missing report of 1 kid, this would have just been the second. However, this now seems to suggest that it wasn't about the kids. It was about the TV airwaves. Maybe this Channel 10 hijack was the first hijacking, forcing this show in front of unwitting children, causing them to become terrified, so that the parents would send them to the KMW psychologists for treatment, or, as Terry put it, purification. And we get to read more about this hijacking thanks to one of the links that the parents dropped during the conversation. Or at least, that's what I thought we'd be able to do. In reality, it's not exactly legible. And just like the other corrupted pages we've come across, it is impossible to decode. The only readable thing are the ads on the side of the website for an uploading site. So I
Oops.
guess we might as well.
I got him.
I mean,
Can I come back in again?
all of this has been us trying to find the zip file containing the dev.
Oh, my handsome man. He's not feeling good. Oh, here we go.
More unforgettable glamping and more outdoor scenes. The Marriott Bonvoy's entire world of hotel brands and
Let's do this one.
It's just Hut's different. Pizza Hut favorites are $10.99. So when
Ah.
it's up in the air, well, the crew can't agree. Just tell them Pizza Hut's got the top rating. Seriously, what more do you need? Pizza-wise, get it at Pizza Hut.
I only need to sit 10 around the corner.
One or two.
Rattle. 1 cup of all
Nova Scotia's home support workers are in crisis. Low wages, unsafe conditions, hundreds left waiting for care. These workers are essential.
Come here.
Home care is
Come here,
health care. We can't fix our healthcare system.
All right, hang on. What do you need?
Minister
John,
Brett Adams,
what do you
you're
need?
reasonable. You understand this. You have the power to fix it. It's time to act. Tell Minister
All right,
Adams,
go on.
support fair wages, guaranteed hours, and safe working conditions for home support workers.
Dev build of Elliot's Adventure. So a website all about uploading files could be our ticket. So by following the link and adding giggleland_devbuild_9213.zip to the end of the URL, we are taken straight to the download page. Bingo! Finally, we get to talk about the thing that started this video. Do you want to guess what happened when I tried to download it? Yeah, it's password protected. Again! You'd think, given how hard this was to find, they'd be kind enough to just give us the files. People wonder why I have trust issues. Thankfully, this time the uploader has given us a hint to the password's location. Location, numbers, comma, numbers. The only location thing we've seen so far was the Sarah's location text before the string of letters the chap decoded. Maybe there was an easy way for us to change our location.
You have your food. Go eat your food.
I know,
Your
that's why I'm using the
snacks.
sponsor of
We
this
need to
video.
work for an hour. Freaking pillow.
Sarah is located, and I don't see Sarah's location in the drop down menu. But maybe we can use whatever she's watching to narrow it down. Like if she's watching Downton Abbey on Netflix, well, that isn't on US Netflix. But using NordVPN to change your location, it will allow us to find that it is on Canadian Netflix. Aha! We found you! Although, I suppose there's always a chance Sarah is using NordVPN to mask her location as well. NordVPN is great for keeping your information private. NordVPN doesn't track or share your data with anyone. They'll mask your address so that others also can't see it, and they'll keep everything behind
Ow.
encryption. In fact, they take your privacy so seriously, they even have kill switches built in so that if your data is even close to being exposed, they will shut the whole thing down. So I guess Sarah isn't using NordVPN, otherwise we wouldn't have bothered finding something in the first place. But you can use NordVPN by going to nordvpn.com/game theory. And by doing so, you will get an exclusive discount on a 2-year plan, plus 4 bonus months for free. That's nordvpn.com/game theory, or you can just click the link in the description. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. But since Sarah wasn't wise enough to use your product, we've got some coordinates to find based on our previous codes. We know that each set of letters refers to all the websites we have. For this, we know so thinking that each website has a number that can be used for this password. At first,
Put
that
these in
feels
the
like
heat for a
wild
minute.
goose chase, but look close enough, and some of these numbers do start to appear, like the number 4 on this Coffee Bean on the cafe website, or error codes on CL Domains. But then there are other websites like Retro Bite Hub and Gardening with Mary that I just can't figure out. And I wasn't the only one. The entire Discord was pretty much stumped by this. But with our powers combined, our big brains made a super brain. And slowly but surely, people began finding the numbers across these websites. And I gotta say, these solutions are great. Some of them are things like how many times this cloud popped up and down until it stops, the number of times the word tree is misspelt, and the color of the 404 error cloud in hex code. This is where I've got to get real for a minute. Actually, you know what? Right, Giggleland, let's talk. What was the thought process here? I'm all for a hard and challenging puzzle. I've sung your praises in every video because of exactly that. This was just straight up brutal. For a puzzle to feel satisfying,
Oh.
there has to be a rhyme or a reason to a solution. Maybe they're all background assets, or maybe it's all in hex code. But by mixing and matching like this with no sense of direction, it just invites that feeling of frustration and can lead people to brute forcing the solution. I don't see another way of doing it. So, if you guys are watching, genuinely, I would love to understand the thought behind this puzzle. Was it simply a test for the community? Did we miss a clue?
Camille,
We theorists,
how are you?
We love to learn from these
Get in
experiences.
front of me,
so we can be
bitch.
better informed and equipped for our next ARG adventure.
How's your doing today?
We did
Whew.
find the code,
Sunday
so
night, isn't
let's
it?
go back to PNG Tom.
Monday tomorrow.
Using the original letters as our order and plonking all of the new numbers into it, we get the password 758483,2827363. Now, finally, we can get our hands on the dev build. And there it is. Sorry, I'm just really excited about this. Now we can get into this and find the answers we seek. When initially booting up this dev build, it looks exactly the same as the game we found before. But now we can activate the thing that the Game Cheat website mentioned, God Mode, which creates new endings for us to analyze. The first one happens when you're just bad at the game and fall into a pit. Elliot falls down and we see a younger looking Elliot in the dark all alone. An error appears on screen and after clicking OK, a bloodied image of Elliot jumps at you. Well, this is more disturbing than before. Wonderful! And honestly, each ending is just going to follow in a similar tone. There's the flower ending where you gave a flower to the horse NPC. Normally this would lead you to encounter a child begging you to help them. But if you're in God mode, you do still meet the child. Only now we see the child in the dark with a grinning Elliot behind her. She begins to cry and we hear slashes. The game then suddenly reboots and Elliot is standing there wearing the child's skin. And then, if that wasn't enough, instead of the sign that takes you
disturbing.
to the final stage, there's now a computer. Interacting with it triggers a cutscene where your perspective shifts to you looking at the computer monitor, switching tabs over to an episode of Elliot and Ella on YouTube. We've got a new episode to watch, friends. I wonder what high school drama awaits us in this episode. Elliot is struggling with dissecting a frog, so Ella decides that he should go and talk to Mr. T. Yup, that Mr. T. Mr. T suggests that Elliot should read this special book which will help him to be brave. Elliot opens it up and he is transported to a black room with a floating head.
Bravery can never be achieved by sacrificing your former self and being born anew.
Just then, we see Elliot's past self, the same one that's in the pit ending of the game. Elliot must kill his past self, but when he hesitates, Ella pipes up.
On, Elliot! You want to be brave?
Elliot is left with no choice. He walks up to his past self and kills them. Suddenly, we're back in the classroom and Elliot is now wearing the skin of his former self. Sorry, after the last episode I got one of those installed just in case. Not that I was going to miss this, because it's not exactly discreet. All these endings and this new episode are tying back to what we said last time with Aztec rituals. We're seeing child sacrifices being brought to tears, something that Aztecs used to do
Christians
to
have done
make
the same.
effective sacrifices. Elliot is then wearing the skins of said
Just the two?
sacrifices,
Okay.
including his past self, which reflects the ritual the Aztecs did to symbolize their renewal. And now we are meeting an actual
Don't
deity.
ever remember
This
seeing
floating head
that
with
or
the red
hearing
and
about
yellow
it anytime
arms,
I
and
did go
it
to
looks
Mexico.
Exactly the same as how the
Pause
gods
it again when I
acquire
go
the
down.
skins of human sacrifices is often depicted in Aztec descriptions and drawings. Xipe Totec. Boom, boom, and boom. I knew I was onto
Interesting.
something with this Aztec stuff. And I knew that being an ancient history nerd in high school would absolutely pay off. Get me now, Ma. But then there's the normal. On God mode, rather than red text asking you what did you do with the sorcerer, the text says you are a god. And with the physical inclusion of the god Xipe Totec, it got me thinking. While yes, we're seeing Elliot literally kill his past self to become stronger, what if these sacrifices were a little more than that? What if it wasn't about sacrificing to a god, but becoming a god? Xipe Totec didn't just demand that people wear the skin of the sacrifices. The point was that Xipe Totec would then wear himself, a god wearing human skin. Could it be that by
Gross.
sacrificing children who have been brought to tears and quote-unquote purified, then wearing their skin, Terry and the cult members believe they can become something pure and powerful themselves? Like, say, a god that also wears human skin. And this isn't even everything in the dev build, my friends. That's just the stuff God Mode offers. In this dev build, you can also activate a move player
I gotta
function
figure
by
out if I'm gonna drive
pressing
6
Y.
hours to pick up one item or not
Two numbers separated
this
by a
week.
comma, which reminds me of the password the Discord community found to open up the dev build in the first place. The tip was Sarah's location, number, comma, number, after all. So let's try inputting those numbers into the move player.
Hey you, the 90s are back with Rose. Cage the Retro.
Player mode, and we've black screened, which is not ideal. But if you're like me and you let your ADHD tech impatience get the better of you and you just spam the interact button, you get a new text box with a bit.ly link to Sarah's phone. And in it are all of the photos Sarah took of her mum's diary, like we talked about right at the start of Act 2. Yes, finally, we are going to get to see Debbie's involvement in the KMW, and hopefully it will show us if we were right about Terry's motives. The diary starts in December 1990. Debbie is 8 years old and has just moved to the commune with her uncle Terry. Seems innocent enough. That is until you turn the page. It's completely covered in the phrase, "My name is Debbie." Why is she writing her name over and over again? Does she not know what her own name is? Wait a minute. Do you guys remember in the first ARG when we discovered that missing persons report about a child named Laura that had been abducted? We suspected that this was the doing of the KMW, I mean, all the signs were pointing to it. But Laura was abducted on November 23rd, 1990 at age 8. The same age as Debbie, and a week before, Debbie starts writing in her diary. Debbie is Laura. She was kidnapped by Uncle Terry and was forced to change her identity to Debbie. Like that, 7 years pass, and now Debbie is working on a new show, Elliot and Ella. She is the artist, and her best friend and love interest Simon is the writer. Debbie remarks about how Ella is basically just a representation of her, and how Elliot represents Simon. Everything we've seen Elliot do in the show, in the game, sacrificing kids, helping Terry, it was all done by Debbie's partner and Sarah's father, Simon. Now, he did give Debbie a warning to escape the commune, but I ask you, can we really trust him? It seems to me, at least right now, that he is in on it. But let's keep reading. Eventually, Debbie finishes all the drawings for the show, but during that time, she notices that kids in class are disappearing, falling ill, and never coming back. Terry simply says that they had to go home, but Debbie and I are not buying it. These suspicions then grow when one night, Simon and Debbie hear screaming coming from the back of the barn.
Now, this
As
one
they
actually
go to
split.
investigate, they find a trail
And I
of
think there was a
blood
chance it would happen when I baked them in the oven.
He tries to pass this off as killing animals for food, but Debbie doesn't feel right about it. The next day, Debbie and Simon get to watch the finished Elliot and Ella show that they've been working on, and what they see is nothing like they thought. What started off as cute turned dark and violent, the version of the show that we have been seeing. They also notice that Terry seems different. He's aggressive and keeps reassuring them that the show has to be like this because that's just what cartoons are like these days. What cartoons are you watching, Terry? Lee, not helping. It's here that Simon and Debbie realize something is terribly wrong with this commune, but they also know that if they fight back, it won't end well. Simon decides that they should act like everything is fine up until they can come up with a plan of what to do, which might explain why he's been helping Terry with all these sacrifices. He's not evil, he's playing a part, putting up a false version of himself for others to see, almost like he's wearing the skin of a cult member, but underneath he's just a scared little boy. And as we jump ahead to 2006, we see exactly that. Simon has now become a programmer for the KMW website and is involved in making a video game, Elliot's Adventure. Simon is the one behind the messages we've been seeing. Heck, every everything we've uncovered on the Giggleland website must have been Simon communicating to us. He gave us these files that we're now looking at from Sarah's phone. He has been the one reaching out to us this entire time. Debbie isn't really happy about any of this. She has more or less isolated herself from the cult, so she's also pregnant with Sarah and her twin. What? We've never heard of a twin before. And in a later entry, we sadly find out why. During childbirth, the midwife says that the twins were tangled in the umbilical cord. And Terry chimes in to say only one could survive. Terry then goes a little off the rails, saying that the firstborn gave their life to save her sister, naming her the Miracle Baby. My guy breathed the room. But this is also another reference to the Aztec culture that this cult is following. In Aztec culture, twins were seen as a reflection of the twin gods Quetzalcoatl and Xolotl. Quetzalcoatl was associated with light and prosperity, but Xolotl was associated with sickness and death. So to avoid bringing death and sickness to the mother and the rest of the community, the Aztec midwife would kill one of the twins at birth, leaving only the one they deemed to be the good twin. Terry believes that one of the children must be sacrificed, or else everything he has built will be destroyed, leaving this miracle child to help bring them into prosperity. That is why the KMW are so obsessed with Sarah and getting her back. Why they keep talking about her location. They need her. We could also take this a step further. Remember that message that said, "You are a god"? Well, maybe that's because in Terry's mind, Sarah isn't just a representation of the god Quetzalcoatl. She is that god. And where is Simon during all of this? Still programming away, becoming more and more obsessed. He says that he's just playing the part, wearing the skin of a cult member while being him underneath. But Debbie begins to wonder if it's actually the other way around. He's no longer the man she fell in love with. He's slowly becoming one of them without even realizing. Just like we see Elliot doing in the game, he is now capturing seeds, i.e. children, and sacrificing them for Terry. He is playing the part so well that he is now a cult member wearing the skin of Debbie's partner. Eventually, Debbie decides she's had enough. She packs her things and she leaves with Sarah. Interestingly, she leaves without reading Simon's note that he left for her in the game about leaving, so I guess things kind of worked out. Well, except for Simon. Do you remember the text we found in the normal ending of Elliot's adventure? What did you do with the sorcerer, Elliot? In our initial episode, we didn't really have an answer for who the sorcerer was. We were told that they were corrupting the seeds and that they needed to be defeated, but we never understood who it was or why it was. However, now thanks to everything we've learned here today, there's only one person it could be. Debbie. Debbie is acting against Terry at this point in the story.
Right.
She doesn't want her to be involved in any of this. Her anti-cult tendencies are the things that need to be purified from the seeds. The children, just like Sarah. Debbie being the sorcerer also explains why we never encounter the sorcerer in the game, and yet it acts like we defeat her during the normal ending. Simon didn't actually harm Debbie. He didn't want to defeat her in battle. He wanted her to escape. So the ending skips the boss fight and says you won, because when she did run away, as far as anyone else knew, she had been killed or taken care of, just like he'd been asked to do. But Terry doesn't stay behind. Terry is now asking Simon what he did with her because of that message he left in the game. Debbie may have acted on her own coincidentally, but from what Terry can see, Simon was the cause. And now Simon may not be safe. My first thought was that Simon was also going to be taken care of, but then I remembered that he was the one updating the website and sending us all of those hidden clues and messages. So that really only leaves us with two possibilities. One, Simon also managed to escape the commune and is now hacking the website remotely to reveal the truth about them, or, and sadly more likely, he is still part of the commune and is being forced to send out all of these messages. The reason is so that
Shit!
to find Sarah again. Now,
Shit!
you might be thinking, sure, we know about all these websites, but Sarah has no idea about the Giggleland website, Elliot's Adventure, or anything like that. If Terry has been getting Simon to reach out to Sarah, it's failed, right? Well, think about it. Though Sarah hasn't mentioned finding the website or any of its mysteries, through us solving all of the puzzles, we found Sarah, her Tumblr, her phone, her location. And each time she mentioned snooping on her mother, us being the lore hunters we are, we pushed Sarah to keep going, to keep looking her past. We are the ones pushing her closer to the world that she and Debbie left behind. Her curiosity is slowly leading her into the arms of the KMW, exactly where Terry wants her, and it's all because of us. These messages on the website and the game were supposed to be a warning to protect Sarah, but our hubris and desire for lore has only put her in more danger. Unlike we predicted in our first theory, it's not her father that would lure her to Giggle Land in the main game, it's going to have been us. We led her right into the cult's hands
For touch-ups.
I just hope that in the end, when we do get our hands on the real game, we'll have the skill needed to undo our mistake and save her. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching. World premiere on Game Theory.
Description. What follows is a deadly card game where your life and the fate of the world hang in the balance.
A mystery.
Jesse loves playing detective.
But the real mystery was your irritated skin. So we switched to Time Free and Gentle. It cleans better and doesn't leave behind irritating residues.
And it's gentle on her skin.
Try Tide Free and Gentle with 100% money back guarantee. It's got to be Tide.
What did you bring back from the last trip? Taste for dumplings. Conjure story. Wake up call. Everywhere you go,
Ow.
Bonvoy ships you, making you a great souvenir of all.
Finish this one guy. Oh, I gotta start sewing soon.
A diaper this leak free sets them free. Only Pampers Cruisers 360 have a 360 stretchy waistband for up to 100% leak-proof fit on every wild child. Pampers Cruisers 360, the #1 pull-on diaper.
Mom? Is Mom okay?
She's just having a moment.
What happens when childhood trauma is left unchecked? What happens
Me.
when a child grows up to create giant cuddly mascots? And what
Me.
happens when that person then puts a little more into their creation?
Me.
You get no, no, no. Ah, yes, Joyville. But while all of that might sound cliche, the truth hiding within these colourful walls is not what you'd think. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's always here to bring you joy. And speaking of joy, it's probably about time I talked about the new indie horror game to hit the scene right at the end of last year, Joyville 2. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Joyville 2? What happened to Joyville 1? And that's fair, because there is a Joyville 1 that came out back in 2023. But the reason we never talked about it was, well, because the plot the game gives us felt very familiar. It takes place in an abandoned childhood paradise called Joyville, beloved by children, the brainchild of one visionary man. Unfortunately, the place had to close down after all the staff and children suddenly went missing. Years later, our nameless protagonist returns to the abandoned facility to find out what happened, solve some puzzles.
Wouldn't that be awesome if the main character was literally named Nameless Protagonist?
Yeah, it's not hard to see why people thought this was a carbon copy of Bobby, and so it didn't really feel like there was anything more to say about it. But here's
way
the
too
thing.
small.
I also remember when people said the same thing about Poppy Playtime's first chapter, labeling it as a generic FNAF ripoff.
Yes, FNAF, we hear you. You're very special.
But fast forward to today, and Poppy has set itself apart as its own indie horror giant. So I wanted to give Joyville 2 the same chance and see if it would be able to throw off the shackles of its Poppy clone origins. And boy, did it deliver. This is no longer a walking simulator, friends. We've got time travel mechanics, a variety of different minigames, and even a pink cat monster that flips us off. I guess that's one way to set yourself apart. Huggy would never degrade himself to such vulgarity. But while cool game elements are fine and dandy, you know me. I'm here for one thing and one thing only, the lore. Joyville 2 has certainly grown up in that department as well. Hidden around every corner of this abandoned kindergarten are little details that everyone missed at first glance. And when all put together, we uncover a tragic story of how one man's inability to face his own personal demons turned his once beloved dream into a nightmare for everyone. Hold on to your magic teddy bears real tight, loyal theorists, as we find out how all the joy was sucked out of the halls of Joyville. Joyville 2 picks up right where the first one ends, right after the final chase scene with totally not yellow huggy Wooly Bully. Except now we actually got some backstory as to why our character came back to this godforsaken place. As we approach the front door, we are treated to some flashbacks of us playing in Joyville as a kid, along with our sister, only for her to give us one simple request.
Brother, save me.
We haven't returned to this place for the sake of nostalgia. We're here on a mission. Our sister was one of the children that went missing the day everything went wrong. But can we still save her? According to the game's Steam page, the events we actually play through take place decades after the incident. Well, it might be more possible than you'd initially think, because instead of being equipped with phaser blasters or grab packs, we're given the most logical thing you'd find in a kindergarten: a toy bunny. That can break the rules of time and space itself. Man, if only all my toy buddies would do that, instead of, well, you know. With this toy, we can turn Joyville from a decrepit horror attraction into what it once was, in all its colourful glory. Although, we aren't the only ones who are stumbling around this place. Throughout Joyville 2, we are introduced to 3 unique mascots that help us along our journey. We have the Star, a dancer with an unflappable positive attitude.
Follow me and don't be afraid to experiment. Dance is joy, it's freedom.
There's Lumina, an excitable cat who's just caked up for some reason.
You can ride the slide, dive into a pool of softball.
And then there's my personal favourite, Tidy, a sea monkey who loves exploring the ocean depths in search of treasure. Well, you certainly haven't lost much sense of style, Tidy. I tip my own hat to you, sir. Or at least I would. But as soon as I use the time travelling ability to take us back to the present day, let's just say the years have not been kind. One by one, the mascots go from kind and friendly to corrupted versions that are hell-bent on killing us. Yes, even dapper Mr. Tidy. And we have to defeat all of them in order to reach a door of light where we can hear our sister laughing. We're blinded by the light, and the game ends. That is basically everything that Joyville tells us about its story. And immediately you can see there's a bit more going on here than in the original Joyville. However, it's the stuff they don't tell you that really scratches that theory itch. One of the first questions I always ask myself is, when does this take place? It might feel like a simple or even boring question, but it can tell us a lot about the universe we're in. And when it comes to Joyville, we might be a little further out than you might initially think. At first, I was focused on this old school rotary telephone that you could find in a secret room, as these stopped being produced sometime in the late 1970s. But then you also have this cool DDR looking machine in one of the employee offices, and DDR was first released in the late 90s. Is this another instance of old school businesses developing technology that shouldn't have existed for several more decades? That's where I was leaning, until Tidy showed me this.
This is crazy. I've never seen anything like it before. I found this at the deepest part of the ocean, surrounded by all this debris.
Tidy goes on to say that it's all very sci-fi, but once you really stop and look at what he's talking about, it's certainly not futuristic or fictional. That is a Logitech F710 wireless gamepad, the same controller that was used on the Titan submersible in 2023 by OceanGate. That's right, Tidy has collected the game controller from the wreckage of the OceanGate tragedy. OceanGate is canon in Joyville. They even have the little 3D printed sticks that OceanGate added to the stock controller. Man, it's been a
That's
while since an indie game
savage.
left me completely speechless, but just wow. What's even crazier is
that was awesome.
They are using time travel. This scene takes place in the past section of the story, supposedly set decades ago, which means the present is decades into the future, a future that we've not even seen yet. I guess that makes sense, considering, you know, time travel doesn't exist yet, no matter how much we want to change the past. But if that's true, then we need to be focusing less on the when of everything and more on the why. If we can figure out why everything fell apart in the first place, maybe we can stop the prophecy from coming true. Although, that's easier said than done, considering the game keeps throwing us into chase sequences. Hey, what was that? Was that writing on the wall? If this game really is a poppy clone, then we know some juicy lore has to be sprinkled in there. Editor, zoom in. Enhance. Enhance! Enhance! Are you worried about your privacy? Not really. I'm locked away in a tiny room under a bunk bed. It's pretty private. What about your internet privacy? I mean, yeah, I guess. It is a little concerning how much I'm Googling things about missing or dead kids. I would hate for someone to
Segue.
find out, like the government. Or worse yet, my internet service provider. Please, creepy wall writing. What do I do? I should use today's sponsor, NordVPN? Perfect! You see, NordVPN is able to reroute your internet to go through their server.
I don't want to make both eyes
Privacy online, which
stars
means no one has to
yellow.
know
So what should I do the other one in?
But that is just the beginning. I don't know if you guys saw my recent Instagram post. By the way, I'm currently in the process of moving from the UK to the US to be closer to Team Theories, which is super exciting, but
I don't think you should be doing that right now.
Thanks to NordVPN, I can
You could be moving back soon.
into believing I'm back in the UK, allowing me to fire up British Netflix stateside and feel the warm embrace of British sarcasm once again. It may not be quite as cool as time traveling to before I left the country, but it's pretty darn close. And with thousands of servers around the world to choose from, unlike in Joyville, you'll never hit a dead end. So, if you want to start the new year off right, free of region locks and privacy worries, you can use my link nordvpn.com/game theory. Or you can click the link in the description to download NordVPN today. Plus, not only do you get an insane discount on a 2-year plan, you also get 4 free months on top of that. And if somehow you're still unsure if NordVPN is right for you, they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee. So that's a massive discount off a 2-year plan and 4 months for free with none of the risks. That's a deal even Santa can understand. But you can only get it by going to nordvpn.com/game theory or by using the link in the description. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this episode, and thank you Wall Writing for telling us about it. Now, what other secrets are you hiding? I kind of went in expecting these to be your classic lore drops like the Hour of Joy, or even more generic warnings like turn back now. However, what we got instead is just, well, it's just sort of mean. You're a joke to everyone. They'll never accept you. You're so gullible. Weakness is your only trait. Those are very antagonistic and very targeted lines. And in Lumina's section, we seem to find out who they're targeted at. Do you miss me, brother? Brother? The only brother we know is, well, us. Are these being written by our sister? These lines are placed right in our face in the most intense part of the game. It would make sense for them to be aimed at us. Although you're not exactly giving me much incentive to save you. But maybe much like how time has slowly corrupted the once happy-go-lucky mascots, whatever evil befell this place has slowly corrupted our sister as well. The trouble is, the writing is all different. The writing appears in each chase sequence with one of the mascots, and each time the writing uses a different font, implying that these mean messages aren't just from one person but several, almost as if it's the mascots themselves writing them while trapped in their rooms. That brother line specifically comes from Lumina's chase scene, so maybe she is our sister turned into a monster? It's compelling and it definitely fits with other games in the genre, but after going through every single message, 2 of them completely upend that idea. You can't hide from me, Harrison, and just give up, Harrison. That name isn't new to us either. No, it's not our character's name. It comes from one of the very, very few pieces of lore the original Joyville offered us. There's a newspaper you can find that tells you that Joyville was created by a highly respected entrepreneur and member of the community. That man's name was Harrison Vanderbilt. Could that mean that we are Harrison? Sadly, no, because Harrison created Joyville, and yet we are having flashbacks to playing in Joyville as a kid. Plus, according to the article, when all of the staff and kids vanished, Harrison was arrested. That was decades ago, but being responsible for dozens of missing kids and adults is the kind of thing that gets you multiple life sentences, or worse. So we can't be Harrison, which means these vicious mockeries on the wall weren't meant for us, the player. They were likely written for Joyville's founder, Harrison. But if he's in prison, why would whoever wrote these think that he'd see them? It just every time I think I have something, it just doesn't seem to make sense. How am I supposed to write theories when... Not now, Steam, I'm busy. What? Oh, An update for Joyville 2? Okay, sure. Wonder what's so important it needs to happen now a few days after release. Patch 1.0.3, new content. Added 7 interactive radios to uncover more about the universe's lore. What? This is exactly what we need! Oh, Steve, I could kiss you! I won't! I learned that lesson from Monica. So, what do these radios have to say?
We invite you to delve into the story of Harrison Vanderbilt, the creator of Joyville. A man whose dream turned into a tragedy for many.
Oh, buddy, this sounds like it's about to be the setup for a classic villain origin story. But the more you listen, the more tragic Harrison becomes.
Harrison's life began like many others, with people in his childhood whose actions left deep marks. Not all of these marks were born of love. Some were shadows that seeped into his soul.
As we listen, we learn that there were 3 such people who ended up having a negative impact on Harrison's life. First was his older sister, who used to use manipulation to control and belittle him.
Her attention wasn't born of affection, but of a constant mistakes and weaknesses.
And while his sister was extremely hostile, his mother was cold and distant.
Care for her son never eclipsed her other interests. After his birth, she appeared indifferent, leaving Harrison with a sense of insignificance that followed him throughout his life.
The third negative influence on Harrison's life goes unnamed in the recordings, but that doesn't make them any less important.
This individual,
Not you.
embodying discipline and harsh perfection, treated Harrison with a cold detachment. To him, Harrison was an object, something disposable.
Perhaps this was some sort of teacher, coach, or mentor that was particularly harsh on Harrison for even the smallest mistakes. And with horrible people like that in Harrison's life at a young age, you'd probably understand if he grew up to become a bitter, broken man incapable of love. But that clearly wasn't the case. According to these recordings, it was because of his rough childhood that he wanted to create Joyville in the first place.
Years later, Harrison's desire to create Joyville was driven by a yearning to provide children with what he lacked in his own youth. He envisioned a place where children could feel safe, where friendship and joy thrive.
The fact that Harrison was able to take that awful hand he was dealt with as a child and turn it into something that created so much joy so that no kid would ever feel the same way he did is, frankly, amazing. But of course, we know this story doesn't have a happy ending.
But creating such a world required more than imagination. It required Harrison to breathe life into his creations, unknowingly infusing them with parts of himself, parts he didn't fully understand or perhaps feared.
Uh-oh, I've played enough indie horror games to know where this is going.
The mascots of Joyville became more than just companions for children. They absorbed aspects of Harrison's memories, his emotions, his past. They carried within them fragments of Harrison's shadows, subtle habits, gestures, and glances, echoes of his own painful memories, manifested in the mascots.
The mascots quite literally became the evil people he thought he left behind in his childhood. We have a sister who is incredibly mean and manipulative, just like we see in the evil version of Luna. Then there's Harrison's mother, who is always obsessed with her own interests at the detriment of her son, just like Tidy's one-track love of the sea and going on adventures. And then there's the Star, whose evil version was an overly critical perfectionist, just like the mysterious mentor who hurt Harrison. Those messages we find during the mascot chase sequences, like "you're a joke to everyone" and "weakness is your only trait," aren't just random insults. They are the sorts of things these people, these monsters, said to Harrison as a child. And now they're repeating them because while Harrison may be in jail, there's a part of him that remains inside Joyville. I don't mean these 3 mascots. At the very end of chapter 2, after you defeated Lumina and all the other mascots, there's a room that leads to the final door that takes you to the credits. Most people just walk right through, but if you stop and look at the wall, you'll find one last wall scribbling, written in a completely different font than we've seen from the mascots. It says, "Hello, future me." Now, in a game with time travel mechanics, this made me reconsider the idea that we may be playing as Harrison. But then I noticed everything that was happening in the room leading up to this point, and admittedly, it feels really out of place. After the climactic final boss fight with Lumina, and after walking through a bunch of testing rooms where all the characters were created and studied, we have this very easy puzzle. All you do is mix some colourful liquids together based on a clearly visible recipe. But what caught my attention wasn't the puzzle, it was the colours of the goo we were mixer. We mix goo that is pink, purple, and green, the same three colours as the three main antagonists from this chapter. And for some reason, when you mix pink, purple, and green together, you get yellow. Now, I've watched enough of those satisfying colour paint mixing TikToks to know that that is not how that works. However, given these all seem to be linked to the mascots, there is one mascot we've not really talked about that would fit this yellow colouring. Woolly Bully, the mascot who chases us around in Chapter 1 and who is suspiciously missing from Chapter 2. By combining the essence of these three mascots, you get this new yellow monster. And who else is made up of the essence of these three monsters? Harrison Vanderbilt. His trauma was split amongst these three creatures. So by combining them back together, Harrison made a mascot that is essentially a mascot version of himself. Hello, future me. It makes me wonder if when we see Woolly Bully again, it may turn out that he isn't like the others we faced. He may look like just another monster, but in reality, he's like his creator. When you look at the experiments and what happened to this place, it would be very easy to label Harrison as a villain. But really, he was a tragic hero. A man who wanted to create a dream world for children to ensure that every child had a place of joy in their lives. But unfortunately, laying dormant in Harrison's soul was a dark place, a past that he ran away from and never fully addressed. It festered and attached itself to the mascots, his creations, ultimately hurting the people he sought to protect. And now, here we are, coming in and killing off the demons that haunted Harrison for so long. Maybe by teaming up with Woolly, we can not only save our sister, but also rid Joyville of the physical manifestations of trauma that destroyed it. And I think that's a really good message for us to take away from this story. We all have our metaphorical demons in our pasts. Some big, some small, but we can't run away from them forever. Otherwise, they will fester and begin to not only hurt you, but everything and everyone around you. Joyville is what happened when those demons are left unchecked, turning the most noble of dreams into a living nightmare. But by working together with someone else, we can overcome our demons. Whether it's a close friend, a family member, or a licensed therapist. By talking through this stuff,
I recommend the licensed therapist. It's wonders for me.
That a few years ago, and without it, I literally wouldn't be here talking to you today. That and theorists would probably be full of these weird, creepy mascots that are just mean and horrible for no reason. Maybe I should give my therapist a call. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching Game Theory World Premiere.
Tom is convinced there's something fishy going on here. He's got these crazy theories about how the park fell into disrepair. Something to do with the fused experiments and a misunderstood villain. He even thinks I have something to do with it. Like I'm some kind of secret villain. He says he has proof of it all too. So all I have to say to him is... good luck!
Who are you? I'm your adventurous side.
I love that. That is gorgeous. Alright.
Meet the pack designed to work for anybody. Everybody.
Hi, bears.
The people have spoken.
I'm going very comical with these colors. You're not close enough for another coat, so.
Now the new 2025 Taos
Let's see what the blue looks like. Blue, red, and orange. How bold.
What if the FNAF books were canon? It's a question that's torn the fanbase apart for years, and now we've had an update to help on it too. That seems to be telling us the answer is yes. But what would that change? What theories would this ruin? And what does it mean we can expect from Secret of the Mimic this year? Today, we're going to find out. Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's always looking at FNAF from a new perspective. You may remember that last time I was getting a little frustrated with Scott and his lack of clarity in this franchise. It is fun to be able to solve these small loose threads, but we're still unable to use those to figure out the bigger mysteries. What's the deal with Gregory? What happened to Cassie? Are the books canon? Well, it appears Scott was listening, and now he's not messing around, because we just got ourselves a couple of new pieces of information to answer the biggest question in the franchise's recent history. Are the books canon? Recently, friend of the channel Dorco did a charity live stream, and as per usual, he got special access to some unreleased gameplay and teasers. One was a new version of 5 Laps at Freddy's, the weird spin-off kart racer thing, and while playing, a new billboard was discovered. It was advertising a company called Murray-Co. and their brand new robotic vacuum cleaner. In the story The Mimic from Tales from the Pizzaplex, we have a character called Edwin Murray who builds a robotic vacuum cleaner. He later goes on to be bought by Fazbear Entertainment and builds the Mimic, the big bad that we saw at the end of Ruin. We also got a very short teaser for a Help Wanted 2 update where we get to see the Mimic's costume model up close. But the important detail was actually in the very corner of the screen, a white tiger plushie with different coloured eyes. In that same story, The Mimic, Edwin's son David has a white tiger plushie, and after he dies, the Mimic begins carrying it around. In later stories like Tiger Rock and Storyteller, the Mimic is heavily associated with a white tiger animatronic with 2 different coloured eyes. A couple of days after all of this, the update came out, and it became even more clear that this was all to do with the Mimic. The tiger plushie was unlocked by using the code 1979, the date we found in the Secret of the Mimic trailer, and roughly around the time Edwin created the Mimic.
I might have to go steam my cat
soon.
soon.
That people reported the Secret of the Mimic demo from PAX West taking place in, and in the Mimic story, we learn that Edwin lived in a factory where he was making animatronics. As you might imagine, this set the fan base ablaze because it seemed like the games were finally confirming the canonicity of the books. Before this, the strongest connection we had to the Tales books taking place in the game timeline was just the Mimic existing down in the FNAF 6 building in both the epilogues of Tales and the ending of Ruin. But now, with Edwin's company existing and a white tiger character who we've only ever seen in the books at this point, it feels like more than ever we are being shown that the games and the books may coexist in the same universe. But if that's the case, what does that change? We've been theorizing about this franchise for a long time now, and we've never really considered the books to be canon to the game timeline. So, if the books are now being shown as canon, I wondered what dominoes begin to fall. Which of those theories get debunked? What parts of the story would we have a new perspective on? And what could that mean for future releases? Better grab your batting masks once again, theorists, because we've got to take a look at that in a whole new way and ask the question, what if the books were canon? Let's start with the series of books that are most tied to this modern era of FNAF, Tales from the Pizzaplex. In case you don't know, this is a series of 8 books, each containing 3 short stories and an epilogue, with all the epilogues combining into one continuous story across all of the books.
3. Oh, thanks for the thumb up, guys. I really appreciate it.
All of which take place in a world where Freddy Fazbear's exists. Most commonly, it's some version of the Pizzaplex. You may have seen the term Tales games thrown around when talking about whether the books are canon to the games. Well, this is where that comes from. This game boils down to these 25 Tales stories being completely one-to-one canon to the games. Fortunately, you don't need to know all 25 stories inside and out in order to get to grips with how Tales would change the game's lore. There are a few stories that make small changes, but mostly it's just to provide clarity on parts of the story we weren't sure about. Stories like Help Wanted, where we learn about Steve Snodgrass, game developer who made the original 4 games for Fazbear Entertainment. Though we find out he's making them based purely on the rumours surrounding the business and his own memories. Plus, his mind is being affected by this little high-pitched noise, distorting the reality around him, and it's all coming from one little disc. If the books are canon, then this story would not only confirm the canon existence of sound illusion discs, everyone's favourite gadget, but it would also
sounded
100% confirm that canonically the first 3 to 4 games are in-universe games. Now, we have known about this idea since the Help Wanted game.
Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up.
But what this changes is the reliability of those games for lore purposes. After the Help Wanted game, despite being told that these were in-universe games, it was unclear how one-to-one they were with reality. This story tells us that they were being made by someone who didn't know the true stories and whose mind was slowly being worn down. This allows for Scott and Steel Wool to retcon certain details from those games without them really being retconned. animatronics. They're just something Steve made up. Obviously, if a modern entry confirms a detail from FNAF 1 to 4, then we can be sure it's likely true. And we actually get a good example of this. Dittophobia. This was the final story from Tales from the Peterplex, and it involves a character named Rory, living in a house that is described exactly like the FNAF 4 house. Rory believes he is a kid with a family, but as time goes on, it's revealed he's not a kid, he's grown up. The house is disgusting, and the entire place has been filled with a hallucinogenic gas coming from the underground bunker. Circus babies. We've wondered for a long time what was causing the nightmares in FNAF 4, whether it was sound illusion discs or just the overwhelming sense of fear and guilt. But if these books are canon, the answer becomes clear. The nightmares are real, but it's the hallucinogenic gas that truly brings them to life. So that's hallucinogenic gas, sound illusion discs, and don't forget we have VR and AR in this world. There are 3 reality-altering tools on the table for this franchise. Basically, we can't trust anything we see in the games anymore. Then there's the more modern stories like GGY. This one focuses on a kid named Greg that is hacking into the Peterplex animatronics, leaving high scores in all the arcade machines, and is getting rid of any counselors or anyone else that gets too close to the truth. With his arcade and hacking sign-offs being GGY, it's almost certain that his full name is Gregory, as in our Gregory from Security Breach, which also makes Gregory Patient 46, the mysterious child from the therapy CDs we collect during Security Breach that also has a habit of getting rid of therapists. The final point of clarity here is that Greg refers to himself as the wizard's favourite apprentice during the story, as well as using the handle Dr. Rabbit, which feels like a mighty big hint that Gregory is working for Glitchtrap, just like Vanessa. To be fair, we've actually been on board with this idea for a while, so it hasn't really changed any of our theories. But if the books are canon, it just solidifies it more as fact rather than theory. The only thing we have to wonder now is whether he's still under Glitchtrap's control. Help Wanted 2 and Security Breach seem to be telling us that Vanessa is now free of Glitchtrap, and in Ruin, they are implied to be working together to help Cassie. So is Gregory also free now, or is he just playing the long con? As I've said, those 3 stories don't really change much about the lore. They provide some clarity and add depth to certain lore aspects that were otherwise just dropped on us with no real explanation, but it doesn't really derail anything. However, that isn't the case for every story. And now we have to talk about the big 3. The Mimic, the Storyteller, and the Epilogues. And if these stories are canon, it causes a drastic shift in how we look at this modern era of FNAF. A quick recap for those who don't know. These stories focus around the latest big bad of the series, the Mimic. It starts with Edwin Murray and his son, David. Edwin is a robotics genius whose company was bought by Fazbear Entertainment, and his job was to turn the original Freddy's costumes into animatronics. He ends up building the Mimic out of spare parts, and it's designed to mimic and play with his son. Sadly though, one day his son runs out of the factory into the road and is hit by a car. But even after he dies, the Mimic continues mimicking David's behavior, causing Edwin to get angry and beat the Mimic to a metallic pulp. Edwin then disappears, leaving Fazbear to come and collect their property from Edwin's factory, where the Mimic begins violently murdering those who come to collect. They do eventually manage to contain the Mimic, as while they begin construction of the Peterplex on top of the FNAF 6 location, a version of the Mimic is dropped off alongside other animatronics that will make up the glam rock band. The Mimic is then programmed to help clear the endos that remain inside, ripping their arms and heads off. But it doesn't just stop at the endos. Construction workers begin being torn apart limb from limb, leading to the location being cemented over, trapping it inside the FNAF 6 location beneath the Peterplex. Many years later, once the Peterplex is up and running, the Mimic software is used to run something called the Storyteller, a conveyor battery that connects the entire Peterplex, and it's designed to create new fun storylines for the characters to play out, except it ends up turning the animatronics into more childish and more dangerous versions of themselves. At this point, Edwin returns and tries to stop the Mimic, only to die in the process.
I guess they're all getting red noses because I ain't got enough thought cells to come up with anything else.
And a number of theories that go out the window if these books do end up being canon. The first and most obvious one, the origins of the Mimic. Up until this point, we've been theorizing that Edwin was meant to be a parallel for Henry. Both were involved in the early days of Fazbear. We've even theorized that Henry had been bought out by Afton, much like Edwin was. Both made the earliest animatronics and both had young children that died, and they took their agony out on their animatronic creations that were designed designed to mimic their now deceased child. That led to several theories about how Henry originally created the mimic, and that it was originally made to be part of their traveling circus alongside Henry and William. But if the books are canon, that cannot be the case, as it's very clearly Edwin that created the mimic. Now, that's not to say the mimic couldn't have been used as part of the circus. We see Jackie from Secret of the Mimic is very much circus themed, but it just wasn't the reason it was created. Instead, that would have just been a retroactive use for it. We also had a theory about how the mimic had been locked underground for a very long time, at least since the 1980s. After Henry disappeared, Afton went to collect what belonged to Fazbear, including the mimic, and then used it to help create the Funtime animatronics, only for it to all go wrong.
No, I can't see what I'm doing.
He then locked the mimic underground and created a Blue Bunny Nixes to keep it locked away. Again, if the books are canon, this theory cannot be true, as the mimic doesn't arrive at the Petaplex until construction on the Petaplex has already begun. There is still a chance that the mimic was used by Afton to create the Funtimes, as they go to collect the mimic just a few months after its creation sometime in the 70s, way before Afton's own spring lock-in. It just means that Elizabeth's death wasn't enough to make Afton go, maybe this isn't such a good idea, which I would say feels strange, but then again, this is the guy who tortured his own son with nightmare animatronics, so it sadly tracks. The books also reveal who is trying to revive Fazbear Entertainment.
My color needs to suit me. My skin, my complexion. New Excellence Nudes by L'Oreal Paris. Ammonia-free shades with 100% gray coverage, designed to flatter all natural complexions. New L'Oreal Paris Excellence Nudes. More worthy.
And turns out it's not an important or relevant character like Mrs. Afton, like we theorized about in our FNAF timeline. I should really do a new one of those. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see my updated version of this. Anyway, instead, it's a random businessman called Mr. Burrows, and it turns out the reason the Petaplex was built on top of FNAF 6 and the reason the Mimic was given access to the Petaplex systems wasn't for some big master plan with Afton's old computer chips and burnt corpse. It was just a dumb business move made by someone who knew nothing about anything in order to achieve the main goal that you might expect from a modern CEO, profits. And because Mr. Burrow dies alongside Edwin after installing the Storyteller, which has clearly been removed by the time of security breach, that would imply that the messages we saw about Vanessa's hiring, despite her lack of qualifications, were almost certainly the Mimic's doing. Vanessa was possessed by the Mimic, aka Glitchtrap, and with Mr. Burrows dead, the Mimic had full control of Fazbear's systems, including emails. So when it says that her recommendation came from the top, it was likely the Mimic using Mr. Burrows' email to put its plan into motion. But what is the Mimic's plan? Well, at this point, it's just simple. If it truly wants to continue Afton's legacy, it's going to need a body, and it has one just beneath the Petaplex. But this is where one of the big criticisms of the books being canon comes from. While there is clearly a Mimic under the Petaplex in the games, it doesn't appear to be the Mimic 2 that we read about in the epilogues. In the epilogues, it's a black, almost gooey spider-like thing, transforming into whatever shape it needs. But then in Ruin, we got this thing, an endo made up of the most random assortment of parts that walks with a limp. These two things don't feel like they're the same threatening creature, but if we think about it and we do consider the books to be canon, I think I might have an answer for this. By the end of the epilogues, the Mimic is destroyed, spring-locked by a jester costume. If the Mimic program wants to use this body, it would need to be repaired. Enter Vanessa, and thanks to GGY, likely Gregory, who can then use Glamrock Freddy to clear the path down into the depths, into the FNAF 6 building, and to where the Mimic's destroyed body lies dormant. From here, they would do what we initially suspected Vanessa was doing with Burntrap. They would repair him using a mix-mash of endoskeleton parts, anything they could find in order to put it back together. That could be why we see it limping before the chase scene. It's either still partially damaged, or it's just because the parts aren't its own, but a random assortment that's not fully balanced or calibrated. That would then tie into the ending we got
This
from the
eyeball
Hellboy
moved
2.
and baking.
We see Mixes driven away in a van that looks suspiciously like the one Gregory drove in one of the security breach areas. Mixes wasn't always underneath F6. After the event of security breach, it seems like both Gregory and Vanessa have been freed from the Mimic's control, but they know what's down there. They put it back together, and because of that, they know how to stop it. What we're seeing in this ending could be Gregory and Vanessa driving Mixes to the Pizzaplex, collecting it from the same place the Mimic came from, the MCM toy store factory. Edwin. That's why
I like this pink. I like the softness of it.
Down with the Mimic, because they were installing Mixes to keep it locked away, only for the Mimic to learn Gregory's voice and trick Cassie into freeing it. What all of this amounts to is actually something we theorized a very long time ago about the future of this franchise. One that we've actually been quite disappointed hadn't seemed to have come to fruition since then. The soft reboot of the franchise. By making Edwin canon to the games, and with the Mimic being the true identity behind Glitchtrap, it removes the parts both Afton and Henry played in our theories. We finally moved on from the original characters and story of Henry versus Afton, and into a new era of new characters like Vanessa, Gregory, Cassie, and the Mimic. The Steel Wool era of games still uses the same rules and world as before, but it's more about the knock-on effects of those old characters' actions, rather than their direct input. And that's great.
I'll do the lavender.
Now, in retrospect, if the books are canon, we can truly split the series up and treat this as a new era separate from those original stories. However, if Tales is canon, this isn't the only thing that changes. There's one more story, one more domino that has to fall, and the story is called Frailty. Here we meet a girl called Jessica, who has a special metallic necklace that when she scrapes off shavings and puts them on dying patients at a hospital, they get better. At the end of the story, she uses the last of this necklace and becomes a pile of scrap metal. The powers of this necklace are nearly identical to the power we saw from the necklace given to Sarah by Eleanor in the story To Be Beautiful. Sarah was eventually turned into a pile of scrap metal, but while she wore the necklace, she appeared completely human. The reason that this is such a big deal is that To Be Beautiful isn't from Tales from the Pizzaplex. It's from Fazbear Frights, the previous collection of short stories. And if Eleanor becomes canonical, then at the very least, every story connected to her also becomes canonical. Agony would become canon. Time-traveling bullpits would be canon. And the Afton amalgamation, or the Agony, the thing everyone said Matt was insane for even suggesting to be part of the game's timeline, would indeed be canon. This idea, the fan base has dubbed Stitchline games, because they all tie into the epilogues from those books surrounding a mysterious character called the Stitch.
Almost done. I'm gonna go another 10 minutes.
Contains the souls of two
Call it a night.
Jake and Andrew. And Andrew is the more interesting one in terms of canonicity. Andrew was killed by William as one of the 6 missing kids that were killed in 1985. Because of this, Andrew is angry, vengeful, even to the point where in The Man in Room 1280, he keeps a burnt and dying Afton alive in a hospital just to torture him inside his mind. That sounds familiar, almost as if it's exactly what happens in Ultimate Custom Night. A vengeful spirit torturing Afton for all eternity. For the longest time, we've attributed this role
I wonder if it'll work.
to the 5th missing kid and a spirit possessed.
Ooh, wow, that's chunky.
Books are canon, which means that at least the Stitch Wraith stories are canon. That would mean that Andrew's spirit is more likely the one torturing Afton. The Man in Room 1280 and Ultimate Custom Night are happening at the same time. Andrew is the vengeful spirit. I suppose that would explain why the one you should not have killed is referred to using male pronouns.
Here and always lurking. The one you shouldn't have killed.
The only confusing part is, why show us Golden Freddy for beating the hardest difficulty? In the story The New Kid, they do find a kid with black curly hair inside the Golden Freddy suit, which matches the description of Andrew's hair, but then he's not shown to possess Golden Freddy in any of the Stitch Wraith stories. stories. And in the Into the Pit game, we have a minigame that shows us an Andrew-possessed Fetch, while Golden Freddy sits there with its eyes lit up, implying that Golden Freddy is already possessed and that it and Andrew are separate. Plus, what's with Andrew not getting a gravestone? The 6 graves we have are Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, Jeremy, Cassidy, and did Andrew's parents just not love him enough to get him one? It does feel odd that this clearly very important character doesn't really appear in anything, and has largely been forgotten in all the clues given to us inside the games themselves. But then, I guess this is where the new games can come in. If Stitchline is canon, that would make the Into the Pit game canon.
Well, we'll just do one in this color, I guess, because I don't want to fight for that.
So, details like this could be more thoroughly explored in those future titles. And actually, there's something quite satisfying about that. What that would essentially leave us with are 2 sets of games running side by side, the Mega Cat series and the Steel Wool series. One aimed at clarifying Andrew's story within the older games, and one aimed at exploring the future of the franchise's story. It all sounds so idyllic, doesn't it? It feels like a number of holes in the story do get filled in if the books are in fact canon.
Just so many
Do I really think they are? Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the other side of this canon coin just a little bit. While the appearance of a Tiger Rock plushie and Edwin's name on the side all seem like compelling pieces of evidence towards the books being canon, there is a chance this is another Silver Eye situation. In those books, we have William and Henry, but while they share a name,
The eyes.
they are decidedly different characters. In games, Afton gets
Hi guys.
locked away in a back room, only being found 30 years later in FNAF 3. While in the books, Afton survives his spring locking, isn't locked away, and goes on to pursue immortality. In the books, Henry unalives himself in 1985 when he can't take the grief of his daughter's death, while in the games, he sacrifices himself when burning down the FNAF 6 pizzeria, which is at least 30 years after the closure of Freddy's. Same characters, different stories. And so, there is a chance we're seeing the same thing happen here. Edwin definitely seems to exist in the main canon, but it may not be one-to-one with his book counterparts. Tiger Rock also seems to exist in the games and the books, but the story surrounding him and the Mimic might be slightly different. It's also worth noting
Parallel
that
dimensions.
William Afton's name and
It's a
Henry
parallel
as a
dimension
character
kind of
in the
problem.
books first, and then later they showed up in the games, which is exactly what we've seen with the Mimic, a character that was
I'm
introduced
gonna
in the
go
books
with
first, then showed up in
the yellow then for the flower.
a similar pattern. The truth is, either of these options is entirely possible. Right now, we just don't
gonna
have
pull-
enough evidence to say one
Oh,
way
give
or
me
the other
something
with
to work
complete certainty. We're just gonna have to wait for Secret of the Mimic to hopefully learn more and get the answer. However, despite the existence of these items not confirming the book's canonicity 100%, I will say that the more I worked on this episode, the more open I became to this possibility. Like I said at the start of this episode, last time I asked Scott for clarity, and it feels like that's what we're getting. So I'd be silly not to take it seriously. Plus, if the books weren't meant to be canon, then including a Tiger Rock plushie and Edwin's name is just sowing discord for the sake of it, rather than actually trying to help clarify things. And I know Scott is known for being a bit of a troll, but that feels extremely weird. By including them while not completely confirming anything, it does feel like we're being pointed in that direction.
I have actually been working on these the last couple of days after work.
For explaining the mess that was Security Breach, Vanessa's original plan, who is running the pizza place, and why the Mimic is different now than in the books. But I guess we're just going to have to wait and see when Secret of the Mimic comes out this year to know for sure. Maybe on April 6th, 2025, if the 4625 code from the New Help Wanted ending is anything to go by. But in the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching. World premiere on Game Theory. I have found Frankie. After just one visit to this deadly trampoline park, it's become clear that this show wasn't made to make money or to entertain viewers as they watch.
Alright, we got pink and blue on this one.
Far more personal intense, and we felt for it hook, line, and sinker.
This blue.
At the Home Depot, we make the doing easier. So no matter what projects you're tackling this season, you can take them all from do
Oopsie.
The Home Depot. How doers get more done.
FNAF's main villain has been keeping a secret from us since
Time
the
is up.
beginning, and none of us caught it. Now
5 more
Scott has
minutes.
released Into the Pit for a third time to try and get us to realise that while we were all looking at Afton and the Mimic, there was another lurking in the shadows that explains everything. Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that revisits FNAF lore about as much as Scott does. Yeah, if you haven't already heard, we've gotten the second main entry in Scott's interactive novel trilogy. It's called Return to the Pit, and if you're a fan of FNAF, that name will absolutely ring a bell. In 2019, we had the first ever Fazbear Fright story called Into the Pit. Then last year, we had Into the Pit, the game. And now Scott is returning to what is clearly his favourite story in the franchise for a third time. But do you want to know what's more infuriating than Scott telling us the same story over and over again? Scott changing that just slightly each. For both the original story and the game, the missing children's incident was shown to involve 6 kids, rather than the typical 5 that we've been told about in the games, which in and of itself caused lots of disagreements within the fanbase. But now in this new book, do you want to guess how many kids there are? It's been changed back to 5. Is this to line it up more with the games? Does that mean that this version is canon, but the original Fazbear Fright isn't? Scott, my guy, I literally spent an entire episode talking about how it would be nice if the books were canon, and then you go and pull this on me? I mean, I'm thankful you didn't change it to something crazy like 7, but seriously. That being said, this version of the story being more like the canon than the other versions has allowed for some interesting theorizing. Something I didn't talk about in our week before theory.
I guess
was
one of them's
how
gonna be
choose
blue.
your
We'll do a
own
blue star
adventure
for this
can
one.
work in terms of canonicity. With each of these stories, while there are multiple endings, there is only one canon ending. However, that doesn't mean that the other endings can't be used to help solve the lore. In the week before, we know that phone guy Ralph has to die at night 4. But that doesn't mean that an item he finds in a drawer in a non-canon route can't be used as evidence. The item exists in that drawer in the world. It is canonically there. It's just that canonically, Ralph never discovers it. Return to the Pit is working on that same principle. The canon ending is Oswald defeats the Yellow Rabbit and saves his dad, like he does in the original story. But there are a number of alternate paths that don't go that way that we can still learn from. Remember, this is the 3rd time we are going through this story. Clearly, there is something that we've been missing that Scott is trying to draw our attention to. And while I was reading one of the alternate endings, something hit me around the face like a yellow rabbit in 1985. This one ending doesn't just add another log to the is it canon fire. It set off a chain of dominoes that completely changed my outlook.
Oh dear.
franchise.
Pardon
It
me
seems
for moving
crazy,
everybody.
but if you'll stick with me, I promise you'll realize just
Anyone
as
else
I
getting
did
blue?
how
You're
this
getting
book
blue.
affects the timeline, Fazbear's
But we'll do
Full-Fest
blue moon
origins,
for this
and one
one.
of the most confusing yet most important villains in this franchise. No, I'm not talking about Afton, and it's not the Mimic. Get your arcade tokens ready, theorists, because we've got a prize waiting for us to collect. Lore. Before we get too into the details, in case you somehow missed the last 5 years of this story existing, Into the Pit is about a kid named
Actually, yeah,
Oswald
I did.
Jeffs.
Thanks.
His dad drops him off at a local pizzeria called Jeff's Pizza. While there, he discovers a ball pit that has strange powers. It can take him back in time to 1985. Back then, it wasn't Jeff's Pizza, but Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. There, he finds a golden rabbit mascot that lures him into a back room and reveals to him a lineup of dead children. Oswald runs to the ball pit to escape and finds his dad on the other side, but the yellow rabbit follows him, pulling his dad into the pit and taking his place in Oswald's life, driving him home, sitting at his dining table, and sleeping in his bed. Oswald has to break out of his own house and return to the pit in order to find his dad, where he manages to trap the yellow rabbit and put an end to it. Now, in the original Fazbear Fright story, it was unclear what exactly was going on with this ball pit. Was it really using time travel, or was it Oswald seeing agony-induced memories of the other victims that died in the ball pit? Agony being a powerful negative emotion that works kind of like Remnant, but not really. Listen, don't worry about it. It's really not that important because in this new telling of the story, as well as the game from last year, we're being shown that this ball pit is using physical time travel. In the game, Oswald is able to take objects from the future into the past and vice versa. And in Return to the Pit, Oswald meets a grown-up Chip, one of the kids he met in 1985, and Chip remembers him. So these retellings do seem to be showing us that it really is a time-traveling ball pit. And if that's the case, then there are a few other details that really begin to matter. Suddenly, anything Oswald witnesses in 1985 are real things present in 1985, even if they aren't the canonical routes. And with that in mind, one of the alternative paths becomes very interesting. In 1985, Oswald has the option to leave Freddy's. Once he steps outside, he hears a voice calling for help. If we follow the voice, Oswald is led to a basement around the back of Freddy's. He makes his way down the stairs and is swiftly bonked over the head by the yellow rabbit. As he lies on the floor in a pool of his own blood, beginning to lose consciousness, he hears the voice laughing at him. Now, you may be wondering why this particular ending stood out to me. Yeah, it's a bit creepy, but it's just another nowhere path that leads to Oswald's demise. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal comes from when you read the description of the character this mysterious voice is coming from. Quote, about 5 steps away, sitting in the shadow, you see a doll that resembles a little girl. She has red hair and pigtails and is wearing a red dress that matches her hair. Her face, legs, and arms are bone white, and she has a blood-red nose and crimson circles on her cheeks. Her entire appearance is unnerving. Immediately I knew I needed to identify this character. My first thought was Eleanor from other Fazbear Fright stories like To Be Beautiful. After all, Return to the Pit is a retelling of a Fright story. She is described as looking like a doll with a clown-like face and red pigtails. This felt like an obvious match, but then when I went back and took a closer look at Eleanor's description, the more that connection felt less and less strong. Yes, she's got a clown-like face, but her cheeks are actually pink, not red, and her body is silver, not white. There's also how her body is described. Quote, its body was sleek and silver with a long neck, a tiny waist, and a rounded bust and hips. Its legs and arms were long, slender, and elegant. Yes, she is described as being doll-like, but that doll is more reflective of an adult woman with a rounded bust and hips and longer limbs. But the doll in Return to the Pit is described as looking like a little girl, as in not a fully grown woman. So Eleanor wasn't really fitting the bill for me. But while I scratched my head over this, there was one other detail that pointed me in the right direction. Quote again, you hear the sound of laughter beside you, high-pitched giggling. You turn your head and look at the doll. She sits there, perfectly still, but the laughter gets louder and louder. As we discussed, it feels like this book is trying to align itself with the game canon. So, a red nose, red cheeks, red hair, a red dress, and a creepy childlike laugh can only match one character. Plush Baby. Now, if you're like me, you're probably sitting there thinking, what the heck is Plush Baby doing here? Her inclusion felt so intrusive, like an annoying app that keeps asking for your data on every website you visit, or like Santi as he follows me around the office. Fortunately, today's sponsor NordVPN can help me out with at least 2 of those things. NordVPN allows me to deal with all these intrusive ads with their next level malware blocking features and encryption. Glitchtrap ain't getting anywhere near my personal data. And as for Santi, NordVPN has thousands of servers around the world, and they're ultra fast too. So in an instant, I can just set my location to another country, like my home of the UK. And now I can not only enjoy a massive library of new streaming content from places like Netflix and Disney Plus, but I also don't have to look at Santi's stupid face anymore.
You do realize that it doesn't literally change your location, right?
I don't know. Do you realize there's an agony murder rabbit behind you?
Do you even hear what you're saying?
But on top of all that good stuff, Nord is offering you guys a huge discount on a 2-year plan, along with 4 additional bonus months for free. All you have
The
to
amount
do
of
is
screaming that was hilarious.
NordVPN.com/Game Theory. Plus, if you try it out and find that it's not for you, Nord has a 30-day money-back guarantee. So it's a win-win for everybody, even Santi. Well, if you want to take your online security seriously, protect your data, and explore a world of content outside of your region, click the link in the description or use my link nordvpn.com/Game Theory. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this episode.
It's absolutely captivating.
Hey, Meta, translate that.
Which one of you is real?
Is writing up there?
From my rider to Tim's menu, try my new scrambled eggs loaded breakfast box.
Wait till and I couldn't.
Let's do this again soon.
We're closer with this purchase.
Maybe Hawaii.
Tokyo. Hey, you're on it.
I am.
No, you're on it.
Oh, yep.
Now I'm on it.
Make it happen with the WestJet RBC World Elite MasterCard.
I have a little shower bench. My little EOS shave cream. Adequate amount of shaving cream. I feel like that's everyone's number one mistake is they start just raw dogging it. EOS shave cream, if you know, you know.
I guess I don't know.
I don't really imagine.
Oh. That eye slid. That pisses me off. I don't want to go through the effort of popping it off. Maybe I can get it actually.
In this episode, now let's figure out what Plush Baby is doing here. The truth
Oh
is,
yeah,
I've
baby.
actually been asking this question for a long time.
Fix
Plush
it.
Baby was first introduced back in FNAF VR Help Wanted as a simple plushy version of Circus Baby, even using the same lines as her, just higher pitch. Her level was, let's say, challenging.
Oh, God. Oh.
But from a lore perspective, this was a VR game made by Fazbear Entertainment to fix their reputation while also promoting merchandise. So, a plush version of Baby that people could then love or hate that they could then take home with them makes a lot of sense. What didn't make a lot of sense is the fact she kept reappearing in games that didn't have that lore purpose. In Help Wanted 2, we're essentially a technician fixing all the attractions, but there Plush Baby is, making her way towards us to jump scare us. In Security Breach Ruin, Cassie can find a secret room inside Bonnie Bowl that, when you take off the Vanny mask, reveals a room full of plush babies all laughing like they do, only to disappear when you turn your back. And you can also collect AR versions of the plushie, with Cassie's only comment being, what is she doing here? Not only has Scott been including her in all the Steel Wool era FNAF games, but he is specifically calling out that her presence is weird. And now she's being shoved into Return to the Pit during 1985. What is Scott trying to tell us with this character? Well, take a look at Plush Baby's design compared to the character she's based on, Circus Baby. What difference do you notice? Besides the fact that one is a doll and one is a 7-foot monster.
Details.
Plush Baby's eyes are blue, while Circus Baby's eyes are blue.
Where's that other
Longtime
one?
fans of the franchise will
Where
remember
did it
that
go?
this isn't a design error from Scott.
Pardon
Circus
me.
Baby's eyes were originally blue, up until she scooped Afton's daughter Elizabeth and got Circus Baby's Pizza World shut down before it even opened. When Baby scooped Elizabeth, Baby became possessed by Elizabeth, and as part of that, gained Elizabeth's green eyes. So for the Plush Babies to have blue eyes, they have to have been based on the character prior to Elizabeth's scooping. Therefore, from a timeline perspective, for this toy to exist as it does in Return to the Pit, a blue-eyed Circus Baby needed to exist before 1985. We still don't have anything telling us exactly when her scooping happened prior to that date in 1985, whether it was before or after Dave the Crying Child and Charlie's deaths. But hey, at this point with FNAF, I'll take whatever timeline wins I can get. Although, that isn't the only thing this appearance teaches us. Because of Circus Baby's Pizza World's ambiguous placement in the FNAF timeline, there have been a lot of theories about why Baby and the Fun Times were designed with claws in their stomachs and cavities large enough to hold a child inside of them. Obviously, it was to capture kids, but it's more about why Afton chose this method to capture them when the only thing we'd seen at that point was him stuffing the kids into suits himself. One option that has been theorized about is that the Fun Time designs were made to capture kids in their stomachs because of the police sniffing around after the missing children's incident. Afton couldn't risk getting caught leading children into the back room himself like he used to, so he'd just have the animatronics do it for him. But in this book, we're being shown that Plush Baby, and therefore a pre-Elizabeth Baby, were around before 1985, before the missing children's incident, which happens in Return to the Pit in 1985. That implies that Afton's use of Baby and the Fun Times was less responsive and more proactive. Like it was always the plan to have them assist him in capturing kids. Like he knew it was the smart approach to have help rather than doing it all himself. He wanted someone else to bring the kids kids to a secluded place where he could then kill them. He needed an accomplice. And if you think about it, this idea is actually being
I'm getting a lot of yellow on these, but
Baby's
that's
recent
okay.
appearances. In Return to the Pit, Oswald is led to a mysterious back room by Plush Baby and is then killed by a yellow rabbit. It's not literally Afton, it's a weird monster version of Afton with hundreds of teeth. But then again, it's not literally Baby either. Instead, it's symbolic of the relationship these two characters had. Baby is once again helping to capture the kid, luring them to a place where Afton can finish them off. A similar thing happens in Ruin when we play as Cassie, another child. We're lured to a secret back room, much like Oswald was, and inside are a bunch of giggling plush babies. Fortunately, this time, no rabbit came to kill us. And you know why? Because the one who is acting like Afton, the mimic, is locked downstairs in the basement. We haven't released it yet. We can't even put on the Vanny mask in this room, because doing so would summon Mixes, the thing that is working to keep the mimic trapped. Symbolically, we're being shown that Afton, or things that think they're Afton, don't work alone. Though it's not just symbolic either. The more I thought about this, the more I realised that recent FNAF has been showing us Afton's need for an accomplice to pull off his plans. Just take a look at the FNAF movie. We've never actually talked about the FNAF movie on this channel before, mainly because Lee stole it from me. Hey, you weren't using it. Well, I am now, so I'll be taking this back, thank you. Dude, you can't just... Oh, look over there! I think Santi's trying to steal an anime episode from you. Hey, come back here! No, you don't! Where was I? Oh, yeah, the FNAF movie. In that movie, we meet William Afton, played by Mike. But a key twist of the movie is that while he got Mike the job at Freddy's, he had someone on the
that was going to be pink.
eye on him. In fact, the only reason Afton showed up at the end to try and kill Mike was because this person didn't do their job.
You had one job. One. Keep him in the dark. And kill him if he got too close.
That's 2 jobs.
His own daughter, Vanessa, in the movie universe, is Afton's accomplice. Just like how Baby, an animatronic that would be possessed by Afton's daughter and represent her going forward, was his accomplice in the game timeline. Now, look, I know this idea that Afton has always had an accomplice might sound like a bit of a stretch. It always seemed like Afton was the sole killer. And believe me, I get it. I've been going back and forth with Ash on this topic for weeks. Just look at this whiteboard. Does this look like something sane people would write? But trust me, I really think there's something to this idea that Afton always needed an accomplice, especially because it would really begin to explain why Vanessa was so important to Glitch Trap in the modern games. I always found it a bit weird that the Minute One program acting like Afton, otherwise known as Glitch Trap, decided that he needed to brainwash someone in order to accomplish its goal. It's a cool concept, and we've always liked the Cult of Afton idea, but it just felt a little out of the blue compared to other developments in the franchise. The only logical explanation we've had is that it needed a new body to be made because its main body was destroyed and locked away down in the FNAF 6 location. But if I'm right about what this book and all of these other games are showing us, then it is way more
first
than
code,
just
first code.
together plan.
Everybody got one code on. You do not have a code on. Neither do you. Okay, but you do. So get out of my face. Ugh. You do. So get out of my reach.
Elizabeth, blonde hair and green eyes. Unlike in the movie,
I need a
she
green.
didn't appear to actually.
I think I'm gonna go with this one.
The timelines didn't match up. But if the mimic was copying
What a lovely shade of green.
did, from killing kids in the back room during VIP to literally wearing the bunny costume Afton used to wear, then it couldn't have just anyone be its accomplice. It needed to find one that matched Afton's previous accomplice, Circus Baby, i.e. Elizabeth. And here's the thing, for once, I don't think this is just another one of those clarifying details that we've talked about in previous episodes. When Scott clarifies small details, they tend to be very obvious and direct. So this relies much more on us connecting the dots and using symbolism. So much so that he's been shoving it in our faces for the past 5 years, and we're only just starting to realize what it means. That, dear theorists, tells me that while this modern era of FNAF has moved on physically from the days of Afton and Henry, there's still much more for us to learn about them and how they operated. And I believe it's going to affect where this franchise is going. And ironically, I think that ties together really nicely with the thing we've been theorizing about for a long time. Fall Fest, Fazbear's carnival origins from the 70s that we'll hopefully be getting to see more of in the new game Secret of the Mimic. This is where a bunch of our previous theories all come together. In my very first NAF, I briefly mentioned how Circus Baby has always been the in terms of design aesthetic compared to all the other characters. But a circus like Fall Fest would allow her design to feel much more at home, especially now that we have designs like Jackie. In my Secret of the Mimic theory, I also theorized that Fall Fest, specifically of 1979, would be where we'd get to see one of Afton's earliest kills. Maybe even his first. This was because of a quote used by
medium
Steelboard's design
flesh.
director when
Oh
the
my
trailer for the
goodness.
game drops. A line from Shakespeare's
Is it
Julius
completely
Caesar
gone?
that comes from a scene between Mark Antony and Brutus, where Brutus had killed Caesar,
There we
but
go.
Antony couldn't accuse him publicly. I believe this was reflecting Afton and Henry, with Afton being Brutus, Henry being Antony, and an innocent child filling the role of Caesar, because Caesar loved Brutus just like the kids loved Afton's yellow rabbit. I believe that much like Antony, Henry was unable
Yes,
to
we're
accuse
using the
Afton
color
publicly, despite knowing about
medium flesh.
of his business. So, by combining these two theories, as well as what we've talked about today between Afton and Baby, we get a much
I
clearer
think this might be the first time this bottle's been open in like
Not
over
only are we
20
going to learn
years.
about one of Afton's earliest kills, but we're going to see the true introduction of his accomplice that he's been using since the beginning, Baby. Someone that will distract parents and help Afton lure
This
kids
one.
into a
This one's gonna get a flush color too.
If I'm right, this would further explain why, after the death of his son, his first instinct was to go back to Baby for his new venture. It was a return to form, back to the partner he could trust after his previous partner Henry betrayed him by making an animatronic that killed his son. The only thing I'm not really sure about, and the thing I'm most excited to see, is who this accomplice actually was. As I've mentioned in previous theories, Fall Fest wasn't the era of animatronics, but costumes. So this Baby accomplice won't be the bundle of wires we know today. It will be a costume worn by a human performer. Was it just another person playing the baby clown role as part of the circus that Afton trusted?
Alright, there we go.
Was it Afton's actual
Done for the
baby,
night.
Elizabeth, a little girl dressed as a clown, helping her dad
I might flush out a couple more, but
game with other kids, making her more of an unknowing accomplice, like Vanessa is the reluctant.
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for that. Alright, you guys, thank you so much for stopping by and putting up with my horrible painting. And, yeah. Hopefully tomorrow night I can... Some of these will be glazed and, their details will be on and I can start slapping them on severed heads. I mean, faces I've ripped off. I mean, bodies. I mean, fuck it, I'm going to bed. I'm tired. Alright, good night. Okay.